Senator Hunt, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. Today I rise after doing some reading about LB649 and AM 933 over the lunch hour with just some questions about the bill that I'd like to raise for the body. Senator Conrad touched on a couple of those, sort of relating to a concern I think we need to take seriously around special legislation. I obviously understand and support the desire to grow our economy and attract high-wage jobs in Nebraska, but I think we also have to be clear-eyed and honest with ourselves about what the bill does and what the bill doesn't do. And I have no doubt that probably the majority of the body will support the bill, but I also want to make sure that the record doesn't reflect that concerns weren't raised for the tax liability for the people of Nebraska and the possible long and short-term effects of these kinds of very targeted incentives that do veer into the category of special legislation. To start, I would raise a concern about the potential for corporate abuse, because this amendment opens up $40 million in wage tax credits for employers who meet certain thresholds, like paying 150% of the average state wage. It's kind of a similar concern I've had to a lot of bills that we've discussed here. I kind of think that these employers don't need the incentive to pay that kind of wage. We are basically incentivizing high-wage employers, high-value businesses, high-revenue companies we're subsidizing the wages that they would be paying anyway. So I think as lawmakers and stewards of these tax dollars, we need to be critical thinkers about what those wages are being taken away from, what that $40 million is coming away from. And for those employers, what's the guarantee that they're going to maintain those jobs? What's to stop a company from hiring the workers that they need to qualify, claiming their credit, keeping them for the length that's necessary, and then slowly reducing headcount or slowly reducing wages once they've secured their tax break? Stranger things have happened, and these are things that we do see happen in the corporate world and that we have seen happen in Nebraska under similar tax incentive programs. Maybe to supporters of the bill, as I said, maybe that's worth it. Maybe it's worth taking $40 million of revenue out of Nebraska for a corporate giveaway that corporations, companies could down the line revoke from their employees. But I think that amounts to a giveaway to corporations at an expense to taxpayers. The recapture provision in the bill, which is meant to claw back tax credits from businesses that don't follow through, that sounds good too, but I also have concerns from experience doing research and talking with the Department of Labor that those businesses that don't follow through, it could be really difficult to enforce that. It could be really difficult to get that money back for Nebraskans if companies that receive the tax credits don't follow through. I actually don't see any evidence in Nebraska's history with tax incentives, either at the state level or the federal level, honestly, which would just be anecdotal at the federal level. But I don't think that we have any examples that this type of wage theft or misuse of tax credits has ever been clawed back from a corporation that misused it in Nebraska. Usually by the time a violation is discovered, the money's gone, the job is gone, and Nebraska taxpayers are the ones left holding the bag. My concern is just generally around the staggering loss of revenue to Nebraska with no guaranteed return. The bill allows $40 million in wage tax credits to be handed out, and that's $40 million in state revenue that we won't have for other pressing needs: funding our public schools, keeping our rural hospitals open, maintaining mental health services, supporting affordable housing efforts. And these are the needs that I hear about from Nebraskans every single day, and also from small businesses. And once again, we're being asked to choose between giving money to corporations and meeting the basic needs of our people, which has been a pattern throughout this legislative session. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. To what she just said about affordable housing, I heard Senator Von Gillern say, well, these are probably going to be employees that don't need affordable housing because they're making a really high wage, and so they're going to be having market rate housing or even maybe some of the higher end homes in Nebraska. Okay, yeah, no one is surprised to hear that. I get that. I know. These aren't people who need affordable housing, and they also aren't people who need a tax credit. They're not people who are working for corporations that need a handout from taxpayers in order to pay a good wage because they're already paying it. What this amounts to is a reward for a few companies footed by taxpayers to just help them continue saving more money. What are we doing to help everyday Nebraskans save money? We do lip service, we send them the postcard, let them know they can get a property tax refund, maybe it's $20, whatever. This is $40 million, and I think that's just a little steep for jobs that are already high wage, that we do have a thriving market for in Nebraska, that I do support, attracting and recruiting people to Nebraska to do these jobs. But I'm not convinced that these jobs would not exist but for this tax credit. We've been down this road before. Nebraska has experimented numerous times with a range of tax incentive programs, from LB649 to the Nebraska Advantage Act, and the results have been mixed. In some cases, these programs, the results they had were really inefficient, they were really ineffective, and sometimes they're also just downright fiscally irresponsible. So I hesitate to keep offering these tax credits and incentives for corporations for already high wage jobs, just under a different name and with a different pool of beneficiaries. Because that's another big issue here, is that the program is highly selective. Saying, well, these aren't people who are going to need affordable housing, so it's no problem. No, that's the point. The point is that's why they don't need the handout. That's why they don't need this type of corporate welfare for the wealthy. It's corporate favoritism. And this is a program that's not going to be available to small businesses. It's not going to benefit mom and pop shops or startups or local employers in rural parts of the state. And proponents will say, yes, it will, because it all trickles down, and the more people we have working as defense contractors, the more money they'll be putting back into the economy. All that $40 million that taxpayers handed them is going to be spent at Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. Very good economic development, I guess, but that's not the way that I think we should use the precious resources we have from taxpayers to target economic development. And if you don't agree with me, by all means, I get it. I get why you wouldn't agree with me, but my motivation is to say the problems that I have with this type of approach. This is only for companies that are connected to national defense, who can pay already 150% of the average wage, who already have the legal firepower to navigate these kinds of application processes, who are probably already waiting in the wings for this bill to go through and get signed by the governor so they can get their form filled out the next minute and get it handed into the Department of Revenue or whatever. And then it's all done, and then all the tax credits are spoken for. It was the same kind of problem that we were identifying when we were talking about tax credits for private school scholarships. It's a select group of people.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hunt, 4 minutes 45.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much, Senator Juarez. So to me, economic development is a priority. Corporate favoritism and corporate welfare is not. That's picking winners and losers. And the losers in this case are the local businesses and everyday Nebraskans who won't see a dime of this money unless it's coming to them in the form of a tip at Starbucks from one of the lucky workers who gets one of these jobs thanks to a corporate handout. This program is tailor-made, and I'm actually interested to know which corporations and companies this is targeted for. How many of them are out of state? How many of them already exist in Nebraska? How many of them have plans to hire in Nebraska? And if there's any evidence that, but for this bill, they would not be doing that hiring. And when you step back and look at it, this bill fits into the broader agenda that we've seen take shape this session. Time and again, this body has gone out of its way to give special treatments to powerful industries, powerful corporations, while carving out exemptions and rolling back protections for regular working people. We saw it with the minimum wage carve-out for young workers from Senator Raybould. When voters passed a clean, clear minimum wage incentive, the legislature came back and said, well, not for everyone. Voters didn't know what they were talking about. This isn't for everyone. We carved out teens and students, some of whom are parents, some of who are contributing to their family's income because it wasn't convenient for business. We saw it again here with paid sick leave. A majority of Nebraskans said they wanted it. This body killed it. And now here we are again preparing to hand $40 million in wage tax credits to corporations who already meet high wage thresholds, while workers earning $10 an hour can't even get a paid day off when they're sick. Our tipped workers who earn through $13 an hour that we've heard years of testimony in the Business and Labor Committee talking about the wage theft that they experience can't even get a paid day off when they're sick. So what's the message that we're sending? We're telling working families that when they ask for basic dignity, like fair wages, the right to take care of their health, not these second-class citizen wages for kids, for young workers, we'll find a dozen reasons to say no. We'll find 8 for 2 hours per bill of reasons to tell them no. But when corporations ask for millions of dollars in tax credits, especially in the name of national defense, suddenly we have no questions, no scrutiny, just a rubber stamp. To me, that's not smart economic policy. It's a rubber stamp. The wage credit we're debating, it doesn't support local businesses. It doesn't support the family-owned operators that have been part of our towns for generations. It's not for mom and pop shops. It's not for Main Street entrepreneurs. It's not for the startups that we claim to want to keep in Nebraska. And it's certainly not for employers in rural communities who are doing their best to hire and retain talent in this tough economy. It's for one narrow group, companies that are tied to the national defense industry, companies that can already afford to pay 150% of the average wage, and who already have the legal and administrative firepower to navigate complex state incentive programs, as they have every time we've passed an incentive program here in Nebraska. That's corporate favoritism, and once again, the losers are the everyday Nebraskans who will not see a dime of these credits, not as business owners, not as workers, and not necessarily even in the form of reinvestment in their communities. And I want to zoom out and put this in the broader context of what's been happening in this body as we cut out and carve out protections for workers, things that voters have already passed and asked us to implement, and we tell them no. But then when a defense contractor comes in here and says, $30 million, money please, we can't write the check fast enough. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Roundtree. While we are debating how much more money we can give to defense contractors in Nebraska, at the same time we're pushing bills to cap minimum wage increases, to carve out youth workers from wage protections, and to undermine paid sick leave that voters themselves approve, while we raise taxes and while we increase giveaways to corporations. This legislature has spent a good chunk of this session telling working people that they're asking for too much, that it's too expensive to pay them a living wage, that giving them a few days of sick leave might bankrupt a business, that giving teenagers a fair paycheck will somehow destroy the economy. I've been a small business owner in my district for 20 years, and I pay my employees above minimum wage. I always have. They've gotten sick and family leave. They always have. And yesterday when I got home late at night, I went to my mailbox, and I'm starting to make money. I'll be real with you guys. I'm starting to make a profit for the first time in about 3 years right now. And we know that, there's a lot of statistics that say in small businesses, you should expect to take about 5 years to be profitable. You should expect years of hardship as you grind and grow and market and build your team and build your product and everything. And I've been through that many times. I understand that. And we're just starting to make profit. And that is such a good feeling. And yesterday, for the first time, I go to my mailbox and I get this dreaded envelope. And many people might know what I'm talking about. You get the brown envelope in the mail. And I just think, expletive. I'm just like, ah. And I open up the envelope, $1,100 tariff bill. That's a 25% tariff on one box of pen holders, Post-it notes, notebooks, pens with steel cases, mind you, trays, shipped to me direct from a supplier and manufacturer in Japan, who I've had a relationship with for like 8 years. And, so what kind of hit does that have to a small business? I'm not the only one. Every small business in Nebraska and in the United States is going through this right now. 25% hit to my bottom line, just as we're starting to kind of make enough to increase wages, to save a little bit, for me to start thinking about my retirement in future. I don't have a 401k. I don't have a stock to my name. You could go look at my NADC filing with my investments and there's nothing there. I don't have anything. I've put everything into my business, as many, many small business owners do. And while doing that, I've done my best to be supportive of my staff, because I know that no small business is going to be successful if they don't have staff and employees that are invested in the mission as much as the founder is. But here we are preparing to hand out $40 million to some of the wealthiest, most politically connected companies in the state. No questions asked, no scrutiny, just one more giveaway in a long line of incentives to the business owners in Nebraska who least need it. If you want to look at what our priorities are, look at the budget. Look where our money goes. Look at who gets help and who gets hurdles, who gets handouts and who gets too bad. You should work a little harder. You can always go take a corporate job and work somewhere else. This is a state that turns down entrepreneurship, that hurts small businesses, but always has a check written and ready for a big corporation. We are telling low-wage workers to settle for less.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And you are next in the queue.
Thank you. We're telling low-wage workers to settle for less while telling major corporations that their check is in the mail. We're holding small businesses to impossible standards, throwing bills at them now for nothing because we have a petty president who thinks my bottom line needs to go down by 25% for no reason, and countless other business owners in this country, while writing blank checks to industry giants who don't need the help, who aren't in industries that are struggling, who aren't in industries that are struggling to recruit. We are deferring every possible investment in public health. In fact, we're decimating public health. We now have a decrease in life expectancy in this country for the first time in decades and decades because of the hits we are taking to public health from government. We're deferring investments in public schools because the powers that be would rather have everybody either homeschooled or go to a religious Christian nationalist school or whatever, and we see those bills and those policies creeping into this public body as well. Deferring investments in infrastructure, definitely deferring investments in local communities, but when a lobbyist walks in with a bill asking for a wage credit for a corporation that doesn't need it, we get it and we rush to the floor to pass it. That's not how you build a healthy economy. That's not how you build trust in government, and this is not how you show respect for the people who elected you to serve. If we want to grow Nebraska, we grow it from the ground up, not from the boardroom down. We invest in policies that we know help every worker, through policies that affect all workers in Nebraska, not just one check paid for by taxpayers that goes to a small handful of workers who don't need it. who are the ones with the lawyers and the bigger bank accounts and all the resources in the world to make sure that as soon as this bill hits the governor's desk, their paperwork is ready to file and all that entire tax credit paid for by you taxpayers is going to be eaten up. This bill favors the powerful, and it's just another example of how far this legislature is willing to go to prioritize the demands of the business lobby, the military-industrial complex, over the dignity of working people. Because while, these tax credits may feel invisible, but they're not. We have bills that come across our desks all the time that are $20 million for this, 40 for this, 3 for this, 300 for this. In my time in the legislature, the types of fiscal notes and financial commitments we have made to different priorities we share as a state have been vast and varied. But all of these tax credits, whether it's going to a handful of defense contractors or a number of small businesses or for property tax relief or whatever, they're paid for with public dollars. And these are dollars that don't end up in our schools, that don't end up in our public health programs, our roads, our mental health systems, criminal justice reform programs. When we're talking about an incentive program for businesses, that's not where that money ends up. And we're seeing the consequences of these policies play out now in our state. Fees are going up. We have numerous bills to raise fees across agencies, across services, as we scramble to plug the revenue holes that are created by these giveaways. The cost of doing business with the state is rising. The cost of accessing services is rising. The fees associated with those services are rising. And the people who feel that first and hardest are the ones with the least power to push back against it. We're watching fees go up on everyday people, court fees, professional licensing fees, vehicle registration, tuition, you name it. We've seen fee increases across the board, not because the services got more expensive to provide necessarily, but because we've blown a hole in the state budget with endless corporate tax cuts and incentives like this one. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Juarez. Let's be clear about what's happening here. We cut corporate income taxes in this body. We hand out wage credits to a tiny handful of already successful companies who have employees that are already making an extremely high wage, already able to build wealth, and we call that pro-growth. And when the budget comes up short, we patch up the hole by raising costs on working people, on teachers, nurses, baristas, truck drivers. We nickel and dime the people who can least afford it, while billion-dollar companies get another handout. And if you're a small business, forget it. You're not getting anything from this credit. But you will feel the squeeze when your property taxes go up because the state didn't backfill the education budget. You will feel the impact when fewer funds are available for workforce training, infrastructure, or housing because $40 million just got earmarked for companies that don't need help. I think it's a problem when we think it's better to grow economy from the top down rather than the bottom up. I think we need to invest in small businesses that can't afford a lobbyist in the rotunda. I think we should invest in workforce housing so that people have somewhere to live near the place that they work. I think a big part of that investment should be rural broadband so every employer can compete in today's digital economy. And childcare and transportation so that workers can actually get to work and know that their kids are taken care of. These are the kinds of policies that if we invested $40 million in would help vastly more people, not just a select few who don't need the help. And until we do that, until we stop putting massive corporate subsidies ahead of our people, we will keep coming back here every single session trying to fix the budget with duct tape. By raising fees, by cutting services, by balancing the books on the backs of Nebraskans who are just trying to get by. We've seen this story before. It ends with more inequality, more disillusionment, more people asking why their government only seems to work for the biggest, loudest voices. Something that really concerns me in our culture right now is the lack of trust that Americans have in their political system. And increasingly, these corporations, big businesses, and the lobbies and funders that back them up and support them are a part of our political infrastructure in this country. It's not just the people we elect. It's not just the city council and school board. And it's not just Congress and the president. It's the money and the interests and the business interests and the corporate interests that all gird and intersect between all of those institutions and systems. And the American people and the people of Nebraska see their quality of life getting lower. They see more encroachment into their rights and their freedoms. They see more regulations on what they're allowed to do and read and where they can go and how they can learn and where they can work, chipping away bit by bit at what I think are the values that we actually all hold here as Americans and as lawmakers. I think, what I just said, it sounds kind of dramatic. I don't think it is. I think that bills like this are part of the problem that is chipping away at the trust that Nebraskans and the American people have in our systems and institutions. Because we're going to have $40 million less revenue, and the Nebraska people are going to feel that hurt somewhere. They just don't know where yet. We're hurting them in ways they don't even understand yet. And while we can't quantify or name exactly what way that's going to be, it's going to contribute to the decline of trust and the decline of esteem and hope that they have in their lawmakers, in us. And I think that's something we should be ashamed of. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hunt, 455.
Thanks, colleagues. Thank you, Senator Spivey. I'm not trying to mount a filibuster. I just sort of had a lot of notes and a lot of things I wanted to point out as we deliberate these kinds of bills. And whether you're a fiscal conservative, a defender of public services, or you're just somebody who wants to make sure that taxpayer dollars are used wisely, the truth is, this bill with this amendment sets us up for a massive loss of state revenue with no guaranteed return. This is $40 million that the state will no longer have to invest in the real urgent needs facing Nebraskans. That's $40 million not going to public schools that are struggling to keep teachers in classrooms. That's $40 million not going to rural hospitals that are fighting to keep their doors open, and in many cases, not succeeding. That's $40 million not going to behavioral health services at a time when mental health crises are on the rise in every part of our state. We spent yesterday all afternoon and all morning today talking in a roundabout way about those costs of mental health crises. When a patient who's experiencing a crisis, who has a developmental disability, who has a condition that's causing them to lose control of themselves, the solution we propose to that is to incarcerate them, to lock them up. And we know that our carceral system is the largest provider of mental health care in the state. And to a lot of you, that doesn't matter because it doesn't affect you. But the fact that these are on the rise, but we're taking away financial resources that can help these things and instead handing them out to more corporations for incentives, I think that's something we should be worried about. I represent people who are worried about whether their kids' school will stay accredited, whether their county will have an ambulance, whether they can get care for a loved one without driving 90 miles. These are the kinds of things that we hear Nebraskans talk about in our email, on our phones, in our committee hearings. What I don't hear Nebraskans have concerns about is wage subsidy programs that disproportionately benefit large out-of-state firms. I haven't had a single Nebraskan call me or email me or say in a committee, I just don't think that we're giving out enough giveaways to corporations. So once again, we're being asked to choose between giving away millions of dollars to corporations and investing in the everyday infrastructure that Nebraskans rely on to live, work, and raise their families. And somehow we're being told that this is good economic development. But we've been down this road before. This is not new. Nebraska, without a beach, without a mountain, we have a long history of experimenting with business tax incentives in an effort to increase our workforce population here in Nebraska. We've tried LB649. We've tried the Nebraska Advantage Act. We've created program after program promising that if we just offer the right set of perks, businesses and workers will come flocking, jobs will multiply, economy will soar. But what have we gotten for it? We've gotten mixed results. In some cases, these programs have been abused, as I mentioned on my first time on the mic. When these programs are abused, taxpayer money is gone, it's in the pockets of the people who are already wealthy, and there's no recourse for us to get it back. In some cases, these programs cost the state much, much more than they deliver. And more often than not, the jobs that are created are jobs that would have come anyway, with or without the incentives. Even our own Legislative Audit Office has raised red flags about the effectiveness and oversight of these programs. We know that the recapture mechanisms are weak. We know that when the money is mishandled, it's hard for the state to get it back. We know that compliance monitoring is spotty. And yet we're considering doing it again, just with a new name and a narrower, even smaller pool of corporate beneficiaries. I would ask each of you, how would you justify this to the people back home? How do you justify giving $40 million to businesses when their local school can't afford a full-time counselor? When their roads are crumbling, when they're paying out of pocket for insulin and can't find a dentist who takes Medicaid? Thank you, Mr. President. I see Senator Holdcroft in the queue to help by calling the question next, which is annoying and rude, and also reflects a lack of strategy because those of us in opposition to the bill are about out of time. There's nobody after him in the queue, and there's no motion on the board. This isn't a filibuster. And if he's tired of listening, he should go do something else instead of trying to stifle speech that he doesn't agree with. We've seen this story before. We pass a flashy incentive bill with a big price tag, and we say it's intended to grow the economy. But all too often, what we actually grow is inequity. We pour resources into a tiny number of businesses that were already doing well, while the vast majority of Nebraskans, including businesses that make up the backbones of our communities, are left behind. It's like saying we're building a ladder for economic mobility, but we're only offering it to people who are already halfway up the building. We're picking winners and losers instead of just letting the economy do its thing. If a company can't hire a worker but for this bill, wouldn't it stand to your reason that maybe that's a company that doesn't need a government handout? But that's not the case. These companies are doing just fine. This isn't a free market approach to growth. And the losers are everyone who doesn't fit the bill's narrow criteria. I understand the appeal of recruiting high-wage industries. I support paying people well. But the way to raise wages statewide isn't to create one-off carve-outs for companies that are already at the top. It's to lift the floor for everyone. But we're not doing that either. We're cutting that off the knees by saying, through Senator Raybould's bill, if you're a kid, you don't deserve the same wage as everybody else. If you're under 19. The entrepreneurs who don't have a defense contract but are creating innovative products, who are creating jobs, who are hiring within their communities, the minority-owned businesses, and first-time founders who are trying to grow something meaningful with no access to state incentives at all, no access to the same types of capital that these defense contractors have. The thing we need to do is just to lift the floor for everyone and watch the state flourish. It's to invest in broadband, education, housing, healthcare, so more businesses and the workers that support them can thrive in our state. And that part of that solution can be about capital too. access to capital and support for every kind of employer, not just the ones with the most lawyers. This bill doesn't do that. It concentrates the benefits at the top, and it excludes the benefits that are most likely to reinvest in their communities, hire locally, and stay rooted in Nebraska for the long term. And Nebraskans will keep asking us the same questions. Why do politicians always have money for business tax breaks, but they never have money for us? I don't know why we're putting so much faith in a handful of large employers, but telling the rest of Nebraska's economy to fend for itself. That's not a free market approach. That's not even a good conservative approach. It's not conservative economics. It's corporate favoritism, plain and simple. It's corporate welfare. And it's the kind of policy that says if you don't look a certain way, if you don't hire a certain way, or if you don't operate in a certain industry, you're not worth investing in. If we're serious about supporting Nebraska's future, we need policies that don't just reward the biggest players. We need ones that lift up everyone. And I know that sounds like a broad statement, saying that if we just invest at the top, we're ignoring the people who make Nebraska work. But I mean it literally. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of Nebraskans whose businesses, whose dreams, whose efforts to build something are being bypassed by the state they call home. And they notice, they see who gets the tax breaks, they see who gets the help, and they ask why it never seems to be them. We don't need another exclusionary benefit program, incentive program that tells Nebraskans they're not the right kind of success story. We need to stop handpicking who gets to thrive and start creating conditions where anyone with a good idea and a strong work ethic can thrive. We have to stop calling this economic development, because what I think it is economic gatekeeping. It's allowing all the funds and all the support to come up to the top while holding a hand down against the people who are making their way up. Thank you, Mr. President.